Hi everyone, I hope you're good guy and welcome to a new video. So today part 2 of my Berlin Techno Ableton template explanation. Last week we talked more about all of the elements of the track, the sound design and the MIDI clip, and today we're gonna focus more on the arrangement, all automation, variation and mixing and mastering. So if you haven't watched part 1, I will put it in the description, but yeah, let's have a listen again what the track was about and then we're digging into it. So yeah, the idea it was really built around basically this melody, and then was more about how to make things evolve around that track. So there is different elements I like to play with, and the first one are the ambience, which so layer 3 sound. So this will give the mood, and then there is this kind of noisy percussion, which can kind of be considered as ambience, and usually they are good because they add an extra groove and they add an extra feelings to your track. And I have another one coming later here. So then after there is different way to always make this kind of ambience evolve. But yeah, that was the main idea. Then after you can add some other element to kind of add a bit of changement. So I bring this lead 2, which is kind of scrolling stuff, which is gonna play the same note the whole track, but I modulate the filter again to make things evolve. And then I needed some more melodic stuff, but more like I will put in the background. Again, like I don't want them to stall the show, but I want them like to be able to add some variation and add some interesting things happening in the background. So I have this chord here, and I have this pad, which kind of give a weird, uncomfortable feeling, but which work well as well with the rest of the track. So that. You have as well this SFX synth that is coming as well sometimes. Here and there, like to add a bit of variation. But yeah, the idea is to have this bass and then after make it evolve, change, put some element more in the front at some point in the track, put more in the back. So that's the main things. And then the second thing I wanted to play as well a bit more is with drums. And I use snare and claps here to really add some nice drum variation. So most of the track you won't have them playing, but it will always be a part. So you can see here's what I call chorus 2. So in the first part of the chorus, the clap and snare are not playing, but in the second part it's playing, and it's the same here. Then after you have your verse, but then after you will have the chorus where they're not playing, and in the second part of the third chorus, which I call chorus 4, they will be playing. And basically they kind of answer to each other. I will come back to this later, but just like I wanted to give you like kind of a global idea of the arrangement and how I've seen the things and how I arrange them before to start the arrangement from the beginning. So we have just the kick rumble, and we have this clicky percussion that is usually a thing that works well. It's not a big main element, but it adds a bit something at the beginning. So at the beginning we just have the kick, the ambience in the background, set the mood of the track basically. Little locket. Then we start with a claw hi-hat and this kind of rhythmic percussive ambient sound. You can hear the first lead is introduced slowly, and you can see that I already, for this track, at around 30 seconds, we are already pretty much into the track. I could have made a longer intro, but that's how I felt like to keep like this. So then the pad comes, slowly it's gonna start to arrive. I have this weird percussion coming. In terms of hats as well, I have the open hats now compared to here where it was just the close I had. So this is something that you can see I've tried to do is change every 8 bar, have a changement. So you can see that's why there is a color. And you can see that I think except 2 times, like this time on chorus 3 and on the first chorus, I haven't changed for 16 bar, but otherwise it's always changing every 8 bar. Let's go back there. Then so here you can hear in the hats there is suddenly a changement, and it's basically I've played with the GK of the open hats, and it's allowed me to add variation without adding an extra layer of sound. So it's great. It's just make the GK longer so it gets a bit more noisier and a bit groovier. That's something I always really recommend, to play with the GK of the hats. Then, so I start to introduce the second main lead. So all the time I have a break. You can see on my Mixdown I have a low cut and this riser SFX. Well, basically what it will do, I will activate the low cut and play a little bit with the riser just to add a bit of tension. So the break. The break was this way. At the beginning I just have the low cut and I still have the kicks and all of the drums, and then gradually I get rid of the elements. So first I get rid of the kick here, then after I get rid of the hat. So instead of having a very abrupt rupture straight away from the intro to the break, I gradually get rid of the element and it's smoother. One interesting thing I've done as well is I bring the filter up of the lead 2 until this point there where I stop the hat, and then I bring everything down. So low cut, getting rid of the kick, filter opening up, getting rid of the hats, filter going down, SFX, and we go back, drop. So here I've had the first ride, which is kind of a noisy, ride, and on top of this one I wanted to layer, which is kind of a noisy metallic ride as well. So here you have the chord who start to play as well. One important thing which is happening, I have this SFX scent that I've created for the transition, so you know, just before the drop to have this. But what I've done here is I play a note higher, then I make it play just right before the chord, so it just kind of works well. If you pay attention to it's like almost they answer to each other. I didn't want it to make them all the time right before, because after if you hear it too much you kind of get bored of it, but that's one of the things I've done. Then you have the second break, you start to have this snare roll, and here what I've done is I play with the sustain. Basically what it does is when the sustain is up, you have a kind of a longer snare with way much more noise from the original sample, and then when I bring down the sustain, it's kind of make it sharper. So if you listen thoroughly, so here it's sharp, sustain is down, you can see minus infinite. Rather than here, sustain is at 0. And it adds a bit, way much more dynamic and kind of making you snare roll interesting. So here again, I bring tension by bringing down the filter of the lead 2 and then bring it up. So here to even accentuate the kind of climax, I will add the second ride. So if you remember from the first video, I have this first ride which is noisy, and I have one second one which is more like metallic when I climb the 909 classic rod that I will put more in the center, and so it's gonna allow me to give an extra energy to another part of your track. So that's how it will be done. And then I have had this clap which gonna answer to the snare basically. So it sounds. So in terms of snare and clap, I've made them answer to each other. You can see there is quite some automation. And so the first one for the snare, you remember here is snare, which is sharp, snare, noisy, snare, sharp, snare, noisy. And I kind of alternate with the claps, because the claps, you can see you have two different patterns. You have one where the velocity is going gradually crescendo up, and then one where it stays straight away. And so the first one is gradually. So just after the sharp snare, you have a gradually clap going with some delay. You can see here the delay is on. And then you have the noisy snare playing, and you have the rattle snare at the same velocity but without delay, except at the end, just to give an extra delay just at the end. The reason why I just put it at the end and not from the beginning, it's because if you have this rattle with a strong velocity plus the delay, it gets too messy. So I didn't want it to first put delay at all, but then I say, okay, maybe just the last 4 clap notes, I'm gonna add some delays, so like this is gonna let a tail when the note stop playing. So you can see, you can hear here no delay, and here delay. And so this way I have this tail here which is continuing until the next clap rattle. So sharp snare, progressive clap with delay, noisy snare, powerful clap but without delay, just on the end. And so that's how it's. That's allowed me to add some variation and to don't just have like both elements answering to each other, but you have as well a bit more variation. And so that's go on until the break 3. You can see here I play again with the decay of the open hats, so it's kind of giving another noisy, extra noisiness. So you can hear as well, you can, if you pay attention to the right, there is some kind of pitch variation. And this is, if you check my rack here, you can see it's something that is common use in techno, that you can like slightly detune your right. Don't detune it by semitone, but by sense. It's just add a bit of variation, a bit of tension and weirdness. And then we have the break 3. So basically at that point I wanted to kind of take a break of this growling scent, and I just wanted to have like a more quiet and deep moment with just like the main melody lead, like this, basically this one, but just maybe with the kick playing, like something very quiet, calm and more deep rather than what was just before, because this way it creates a nice contrast, because it was very, very energetic and very noisy and very full just right before. And then if you come to something a bit more quiet, it creates a nice dynamic, and then later on, when we're gonna decide to go full on again, it will create this nice contrast. So on the break, I'm gonna get rid of the right. You can see the hats as well. I get rid of the noisy right, and then after when I will drop, I will completely get rid of it, and I get rid of the perk 2 and perk 3. You remember, is that too noisy thing. So yeah, just really to drop the energy, drop the intensity. So again, low cut, and again the filter goes up and go down. So here I still have my snare and clap playing, and you can see what I've done here. I've left the hats and the kick until the last bar, and I stop at the last bar to just have the clap, and the filter is going up and down. This is something work well, especially if you plan to, when the sound drop, to have your filter low. You just bring it up right before the drop, like during your build up, and then right before to drop you bring down again. you have your lead, which is low pass filtered, so you don't really hear it. And it's really just the focus on this. So then you bring the hats. Because obviously, even if I describe it as a quiet moment, you still want things to get going. You know, you don't want to lose the energy neither too much. But yeah, so you have to bring your hats quite quickly, like after 8 bar. And then after, again, you progressively reintroduce everything. You can see like the automation of the filter here. You can see the filter is going back up. Here I have a short break. So here basically the short break is like, okay, now the quiet moment is finished, let's go back to some serious stuff. So that's how I saw it. You can see like here I was gradually opening the filter again. I introduced the perk 2 and perk 3. Then you have the break, and then I decided to drop it with some ride to really get this energy and straight away get going. Obviously, this one modulated. So you remember here what I've done? Here what I've done is I decide to, the LFO2 sometimes is playing, sometimes no. And you can see this part, I decide to let the LFO modulate the filter by itself. This is something I've done because for this scent, sometimes I wanted to have the control over the filter, to me being able to manually open it and close it, for example, during the break. But sometimes in some part like this one, I don't mind to have it automatically modulated by a LFO. So it's always changing and I don't need to do it manually. So you have this during 16 bar, and then after, like same than the previous one, you reintroduce the snare and the clap to have an extra groove with the drum. So again, the break. Except that this time I just left it just for 8 bar. I could have make it longer, maybe 16 bar, but I don't know. I was just feeling to leave it for 8 bar for this one. And then I have this kind of final break where I will get rid of the ride here in terms of for the hats. And the lead 2, probably the filter is gonna start to go down. The volume of the lead 1 as well here. But yeah. So here, even though it's the outro, it's still going hard. Put the volume down and the filter down of the main lead, and then you just have the ambience. So that was the main idea of the arrangement. Now in terms of automation and modulation, you can see I already show you more or less everything. The ride with the pitch, there was as well the GK of your open hats. So sometimes I will do it with the close hat as well. I haven't done it for this one because it wasn't really working well, but that's something you can do, and I've done here which work well. Here with the snare, I play with the sustain. I could have played with the GK again, having something more sharp and less noisier, and then after playing with the sustain or the decay to have something more noisier with a longer decay. That adds variation, that adds movement, that adds groove. Same goes with the claps, that's what I've done. Then perk, I haven't done much in terms of modulation and variation. Same with perk 2, this is pretty straightforward. Then you have the lead, where this one obviously is a sine wave, so but you can still like kind of filter it to have some quieter moment than other. This is obviously very subtle, but this is something I've played with. And here I just explained the LFO, how sometimes I put the LFO, sometimes no. Chord, there is no automation, pad neither, and SFX there is not that much neither. And then you just have like amp as well, but there is not that much automation and variation. Just the filter, it's like kind of always modulating to always making move, but that's ambient sound, so it's like pretty subtle, especially in the context of the track. But yeah, just open and close from time to time. And then the mixdown, I already explained. I use a lockout, so what you can see here, Dove is on off for the break, or usually I like to use them as well just before a new part, like for example before to introducing hats, or like I've done here. Basically you don't have hat, and here you're gonna have a hat, so I'm just gonna make a lockout and then introduce the hat. That's a pretty common thing to do. And then the riser is just like to have this washout effect a little bit for the break, but here again I've been very gentle with. You can hear the effect, but it's not crazy. Alright, now let's talk about mixing. So if you're familiar with my video, you know I've kind of have a rule when it's come to mixing. And first rule is being very careful about which element you pick up, because that's what's gonna affect 99% of your mix. Making sure you pick up samples which are fitting well together, sound of your synth which are fitting well together. Because obviously if you pick up elements which are on the same frequency range, they're gonna mask each other, and it's gonna be very hard at the mixing to kind of make them fit well together. And even if there are no masking frequency, sometimes two sound doesn't fit well together and the mix cannot help that. So that's my first advice. Second thing that I usually do, I usually use 4 main devices, which are EQ to boost or remove frequency, saturation to add harmonics and a bit of loudness, and then delay to add a bit of movement or put in the space, and reverb as well, put it in the space. So that's what I've done on most of them. Here, for example, for my kick and rumble, I've talked about this last week, but because it's more like sound design than really mixing. But here, like, I didn't really like it, my kick, so I just get rid of the frequency. I didn't like it. I don't know why there is a click, but this is just the reverb. It's just a tiny amount of reverb, but with a very short decay, just to help the kick cut through the mix. And yeah, in terms of hats, one things I've done that I'm doing now often. For the hats, you can see this one, I didn't even process them. Here is again, you see, saturation, EQ. Usually for the hats, I will try to high pass as much as I can to get rid of all of the unnecessary frequencies. So this is something you have to do with the rest of the mix. And I will usually boost somewhere where I think the hats really shine. And here I just have saturation. You see, it's nothing crazy. Here I add a bit reduce, but it's more like sound design for a bit of character. You see, high pass as much as I can, boost around here. Then after a while I boost this frequency rather than another. It's just depend of the sample and how it fits in the track. I have this delay device which I use as a stereo with, which is kind of a has effect to make it super stereo. This is something I usually do for my ride. I put them on the stereo and then I apply a strong sidechain. You can see here again, saturator, EQ to get rid of the frequency. Here with the ride, especially the 909 ride, you always have like one frequency which is like very resonant and you have to cut it. So here if you listen up, you can hear it. You have others, but the thing is, if you remove them, you're gonna lose all of the character of your ride. So I usually just cut one. Now, one thing I like to do with the hat is use drum bus in soft mode, and I really like to, it's really add drive and crunch, really add more harmonics, and I don't know. Add a bit of harmonics. I compress everything as well. And then one thing I like to use is the transient. So this is usually something you will use to add or remove transient. I mean, I don't see it this way. The way I see this knob is, if you go positively, it's gonna kind of accentuate your transient, but it's kind of sometimes make it things a little bit more messy, and that's why I rather use it in a negative way. Because in the negative way, it acts more like a gate, so it's gonna kind of sharpen a little bit all of your hats. And so this way, when sometimes you use reverb, you know you use a bit too much reverb, and use it a bit this transient negatively, it's kind of gonna sharpen your reverb and make your hats overall a bit more clean. So this is too much, obviously, but yeah, I just like how this works on hats. So that's one mixing tips I can give you. K, EQ, override. So then why I will use override rather than amp or saturation, it really depends what you want. What I like with overdrive is because you can filter, so you can really apply the overdrive on the specific frequency range. And usually overdrive add a bit more crispiness rather than saturator, which will be more like warm harmonics. And amp will be more like crunchy and buzziness, I would say. So this is really depend what you are looking for, what kind of distortion you want to add to your hats. Again, stereo, reverb, yeah, as I said, classic, and then a bit of sidechain, or obviously, or depending on the element. But yeah, that's pretty much. Then yeah, saturator. So saturator, I will use the analog clip if I really want something very soft, and then after, it really depends. They all kind of react different, but soft sine, major curve. If you want something like a medium saturation, a bit more crunchier, but not too crazy. And then hard curve if you really want to go nuts. So yeah, I get rid of the body because I didn't really need it here. But then for the reverb, how I set it, usually I see it for the reverb like a three-dimensional thing. So I will have the first dimension will be like more room kind of vibes, where I will put all of the drums. So this obviously can change from one track to another. It's not always the same, but this is the main idea. Then I will have a second reverb, which is kind of a plate reverb, something around 2-3 seconds. And then after I will have more like a whole reverb, like an ambience reverb, where it's more like more than 12 seconds, 16 seconds, and which usually more dry wet. And so the first reverb, which is between 0 and 1 second, will be more for the drum. Second reverb is more like for the leads and the synth, which is like usually between 1 and let's say 6 seconds. Again, it depends what you're looking for, and it will depend as well your sound. And then the other reverb, which is more like a background reverb, like to really put things in the background. More than 12 seconds, usually dry wet around 50%. So that's what I will use usually, and set my reverb according to how I want. So yeah, and then after it's boosting frequency. I feel like need to be boost to have the element cuts through the mix. It's really one tip I can give, for example, with reverb is sometimes to don't try to have the shortened reverb possible, like, because it's really easy to with reverb to add a longer decay, because usually it sounds nicer, but the thing is usually it gets you mix very messier, and sometimes you can realize that in the whole mix you can have a shortened decay and you don't really pay attention that it's a shortened decay, but it's gonna help you mix and make it less messier, because this long tail of the reverb usually is what gets things completely messed. So that's another tip with the reverb I can give you in terms of mixing. And then again, saturation, EQ. So here it's more like sound design, because to really get certain color. Delay again, it really depends. Usually it's more like a sound design tool. We give a bit of groove, and I like to use the 3 here in sync mode, with usually here it's a lot of feedback and dry rate. Usually I stay around 30% for both. Yeah, then after I talk about in the sound design part, where because most of the effects are more like kind of sound design rather than really mix. But yeah, and then I have a Mixdown. So you can wondering, why do I have a Mixdown? I already explained it, but I'm gonna explain it quickly. The reason here for this track, it's because I like to separate like effects which are like a kind of sound design effects related to the track, to the arrangement. Like for example, a low cut or this kind of washout effect. This is kind of effect that you will usually put on your master and will affect the whole track. And the reason why I don't put them on the master is because I like to keep the master track either empty or either for your mastering chain. So that's why I create this Mixdown first. So this way I can really easily differentiate the effects that are like sound design effect or more like arrangement effect than effects which are related to the mastering. Because if you put them all together, maybe it can easily happen to kind of mix both of them and you don't know which one is which one. I mean, it's just to make things clear. If you wonder why is this, is because usually when I start creating a track, I always start here, then I build here in the session, and then I record it live in the arrangement. You can see in the live stream I do this often. Now let's go into the mastering. So here the mastering was pretty heavy, so let me deactivate everything and we will come back. You can see it's quite a long chain. So first things, utility, bass in mono under 200 Hz, like a bit of width. This is, I just put slightly, I don't think it's doing much, but then I have EQ, which is kind of rebalancing, and my whole mix. So usually this, if you do your mix very well, you don't have really that much to do it, but yeah, for this track I had a bit of work. So look at under 30 Hz. Let me actually remove and do one by one. So look at here, I get rid at 124. I don't know, this is again, it's like for the EQ, it's really depend of each track. Each track it will be different frequency that you're gonna remove. The best way is to just grab one and like kind of sweep until, like, if you feel like there is something wrong, usually you're gonna sweep around where you think it is, and then you're gonna probably find where. And it's a very subtle changement. And then group compressor. So this I usually use often the same parameter and the same settings. I put the attack at 3 milliseconds, release here, ratio at 4. And then what I will do, usually by default the threshold is at 0, and I will go down until I have like 3-4 dB of reduction. And this is and then compensate this 3-4 dB, depends, probably like this. One thing though I recommend to do is to EQ your input signals, because otherwise your low end is gonna trigger the sidechain, and you don't want that, because usually the low end is where there is the most of the energy. So you don't want your low end to trigger the compression. So you're gonna use the EQ. So like this, you filter above 300 Hz, and that's what's gonna trigger your compressor. Because you see, if I remove, it's gonna be like it's gonna be too much pumping effect. Here your saturator is just to add a bit of harmonic. It's just a little bit, you can see it's just a little bit of dry wet as well. Then I would like to use mid-side EQ just to add a bit of stereo. So I didn't even use the middle EQ, it's just like the side one, and I will usually boost around 1 kilo, 3 kilo, sometimes even 5 or 8. But it's just help with the stereo. Yeah, and then color limiter. This is really to add loudness and a bit of warmth to your sound. This is a Max for Live device, but it's available for free. I will always be gentle with the saturation, and then I will put the ceiling at 0. I leave the release there, I leave the local head, I leave the color there, and then I will just grab the loudness and add. I don't want something too crazy, so then channel EQ. So this was just because at that point I was feeling okay. Still, I feel like it was missing a little bit of mid-high, so I used a channel EQ. I could have again modify everything here, but obviously it's easier to just drop another EQ and to rebalance a little bit here. Very subtle, you see 2 dB, 2 dB. because at that stage I say, okay, the bass is too much, the bass is too present, and so it's kind of unbalancing the high, like it's not really well balanced, so that's why. And then I have two limiters just to make things louder. Could have been more like that. So why 2 instead of 1? I don't know. It just works like better. And yeah, that's pretty much it with the mastering. So yeah, one thing important I haven't said is like mastering. I always consider my mastering like a homemade mastering, and because I think it's something that must be done by professional people who are just doing that every day and it's their only job. And second thing, it's always good to have a second fresh pair of ears to listen to your track, to spot all of the things you haven't seen yourself. So that's why I would always recommend to someone make your mastering. But this is a good mastering if you want to have an idea how your track will sound loud, or for example if you want to try it in the club and you know you need to kind of make a quick master to rebalance everything, make it loud, so you can learn a little bit how to do everything. But like for the final master version of your track, I will always recommend to use professional service. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. You can grab the template, link in the description. You can rewatch part 1 if you don't remember everything, and see you soon, guys. Bye bye.